Rain streaked the glass as Sarah entered. 3 bellies glowed like silent accusations. My lies bled out. I craved control, not love now. A cold dawn waits with unopened letters and footsteps fading into nothing. From the outside, my life was a masterpiece of suburban resilience. It was clean. It was tidy. To the casual observer passing my semi-detached house in the honeyed glow of a street lamp, it looked almost heroic. In a world where families fractured and fathers vanished into the ether of midlife crises, I was the one who had stayed. I was the single dad, a title I wore like a suit of armor. Every morning followed a rhythmic, almost meditative ritual, the kettle humming like a tired companion, the sourdough browning in the toaster for just a second too long, and the sharp, practiced click of Emma's lunchbox snapping shut. I had mastered the intricate geometry of being 2 people at once. I could braid my daughter's hair with the tender muscle memory of a saint, weaving strands of gold while my mind was miles away, navigating the treacherous waters of a digital deception. While Emma ate her porridge, my thumb would dance across the cold glass of my phone, ruthlessly deleting a string of I miss you messages from women she didn't know existed. I would kiss her forehead before school, right where her skin was still warm from sleep, and I would tell her I'd be there at the school gates for pickup. I always said that part with absolute conviction. I had to. Because if I stopped believing my own lies for even a fraction of a second, the entire glass cathedral I had built would shatter around us. The neighbourhood saint. The world is remarkably easy to fool when you give it a story it wants to hear. The neighbours in our quiet cul-de-sac watched me with soft, heavy smiles, the kind reserved for martyrs or war heroes. When I carried the groceries in, Mrs. Higgins from number 42 would nod approvingly, her eyes shimmering with a misplaced sympathy. Teachers at the primary school spoke my name with a certain reverence during staff meetings. "He's so resilient," they would whisper in the corridors. A man who survived a scandalous divorce and kept his dignity. A father who put his child above his own heart. I let them believe it. I fed that narrative like a prized stallion. My ex-wife, Sarah, had left town quietly 3 years ago, taking her jagged anger and her suffocating silence with her. The local gossip mill preferred a simple, digestible version of the truth. The marriage had withered, the mother had fled, and the father had endured. It was a neat, forgiving narrative. It absolved me of all sins without ever forcing anyone to ask what I had done to make Sarah's departure so desperate. To the world, I was a lesson in stability. To myself, I was a man walking a tightrope over a canyon of my own making. The anatomy of a lie. What no one saw were the nights. When the lights were extinguished and Emma's breathing slowed into the deep, rhythmic pulse of the innocent, the apartment changed. The shadows lengthened, and the silence became a physical weight. The ticking of the hallway clock sounded less like time passing and more like a countdown to an explosion. It was in these hours that my phone would come alive, lighting up the dark like a series of tiny, urgent flares. Each notification was a demand. Each buzz was a requirement for me to shift my shape, to alter my voice, to become the man someone else needed me to be. I had learned to live in compartments. I had divided my soul into 3 distinct territories, and I guarded the borders with the paranoia of a dictator. There was no overlap. There could be no bleed. Mondays were for Lily. Lily was a theatre nurse who lived in a flat overlooking the canal. She smelled of lavender soap and expensive antiseptic. She believed in soft beginnings and the healing power of vulnerability. With her, I played the role of the wounded soul. I was the man still reeling from a traumatic betrayal, slowly, painfully learning to trust the world again. I would sit on her linen sofa and speak about Sarah in hushed, regretful tones, carefully curated to make me look like the victim. Lily loved to fix things, and I made myself look broken so she would have something to do. She believed my pain made me honest. She didn't realize that my honesty was just another layer of the mask. Wednesdays belonged to Maya. Maya was a different creature entirely. She was an architect, not of shadows, like me, but of steel and glass. She didn't want fragments, she wanted a future. She spoke at a frantic pace, dreamed even faster, and looked at me as if I were an unfinished blueprint she intended to complete. With her, I wasn't the wounded healer, I was the ambitious, steady professional. We drank vintage Bordeaux and mapped out 5-year plans on the backs of envelopes. She admired my fatherhood, she saw it as a badge of responsibility, a proof of my husband potential. With Maya, I felt impressive. I felt like a man who could command the skyline. The weekends were Nina's. Nina lived in the silences between heartbeats. She was younger, more fragile, and she loved with a desperate, clenching intensity that often made it hard for me to breathe. When Emma stayed with her grandparents, I disappeared into Nina's world. With her, I was the protector. I was the man who made room for her chaotic, overflowing emotions. She would rest her head on my chest as if it were a sanctuary, and I would stroke her hair, promising her a life I knew I would never deliver. Nina loved me without conditions, and that terrified me more than anything else. The illusion of control. Each woman knew a different Adam. Each one was convinced she was the only person on the planet who truly understood me. I told myself this was balance. I convinced myself that I wasn't actually hurting anyone because, in their respective worlds, they were happy. If a lie makes someone smile, is it still a sin? I believed the truth was flexible, a piece of clay I could mold to suit the occasion. As long as the compartments remained sealed, as long as the Monday Adam never met the Wednesday Adam, I was safe. I became a master of logistics. I synced my digital calendars with the precision of a military operation. I had separate folders for photos, separate ringtones for calls, and I had learned the exact cadence of each woman's voice so I could respond correctly without even looking at the screen. I was the ultimate puppeteer, pulling the strings of 3 different lives while keeping my own feet firmly planted on the ground. But secrets have a weight that physics cannot measure. They are light when they are young, like feathers carried in a pocket. But as the months turned into a year, they began to harden. They turned into lead. They began to shift in the dark, leaning against the walls of my compartments, searching for a crack. I started to feel a subtle pull downward, a heaviness in my limbs that no amount of coffee could cure. I was an expert at absence, knowing exactly when not to be somewhere, knowing exactly which lie to tell when a weekend ran too long. In the daylight, I was still the perfect single dad. I packed the lunches. I attended the school plays. I smiled for the photographs that Emma drew of us, 2 stick figures holding hands under a yellow sun. I taped those drawings to the fridge like medals of honor, using them to remind myself that I was doing all of this for us. But at night, the phone would buzz. And the rain would start to streak the glass, looking like silver scars against the blackness of the sky. I would stand at the window, watching the city lights blink like distant warnings, telling myself that the storm was still a long way off. I was wrong. The storm wasn't coming from the outside. It was already inside the house. The knock came too softly to be polite. It was evening, one of those in-between hours where the sky can't decide whether to forgive the day or punish it. Emma was already asleep, her bedroom door cracked just enough for the hallway light to spill in like a promise I still kept to her. I was standing in the kitchen, rinsing a mug I hadn't finished, when the sound reached me again. Not urgent. Not angry. Certain. I knew, before I opened the door, that whatever waited on the other side would not fit neatly into my life. When I pulled it open, Sarah stood there with a thin cardboard folder pressed to her chest, rain darkening the shoulders of her coat. She looked different, sharper, maybe, like time had carved her down to essentials. Her hair was shorter. Her eyes didn't soften when they found mine. "I'm just returning documents," she said. Her voice was even. Too even. Emma's birth records. Insurance copies. I found them while unpacking. I stepped aside without thinking. Old habits still moved my body faster than my conscience. "Come in," I said. The apartment seemed to inhale her presence. The walls remembered her. The air changed. She took 2 steps inside and stopped. Her gaze dropped, not to me, but to the floor. 3 pairs of women's shoes stood near the door. Lily's sensible flats. Maya's sharp heels. Nina's worn sneakers. I had meant to move them. I always meant to. Sarah didn't say anything at first. She just looked. The silence stretched, thin as wire. "You redecorated," she said finally, her tone dry. My mouth opened. Closed. Somewhere behind me, a phone buzzed once, then again. I felt my pulse jump like a thief caught mid-step. I began. Voices carried from the living room. Soft at first. Then overlapping. Sarah's head lifted slowly. "Are we interrupting something?" she asked. The walk from the entryway to the living room felt longer than it ever had. Each step pressed the truth closer to the surface, like a bruise begging to be touched. I rounded the corner first, as if I could shield her from what waited. I couldn't. Lily sat on the couch, hands folded protectively over her stomach, her face pale but composed. Maya stood near the window, arms crossed, jaw tight, the city lights catching in her hair. Nina hovered near the bookshelf, twisting her fingers together, eyes red from crying. They all looked up at once. Time fractured. "Adam," Lily said, confused. Maya's brows drew together. "Who's that?" Nina's breath hitched. She knew before anyone else did. She always did. Sarah stepped into the room behind me, and the air detonated. "I'm his ex-wife," she said calmly. Too calmly. "Sarah." The word ex landed like glass. Lily stood up slowly. "Ex or wife?" Maya let out a short, incredulous laugh. "You told me you were divorced, not..." She stopped herself, eyes flicking between us. "Not this." Nina's hand went to her mouth. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no." I tried to speak, but the room had turned against me. Every sound was louder now, the rain against the windows, the hum of electricity, the uneven rhythm of breathing. "I came to drop off paperwork," Sarah continued, her eyes never leaving my face. "But it seems I walked into something else." Lily looked at me then, searching. "Adam." Maya's voice cut in, sharp. "Why are there 3 women here?" No one waited for my answer. Lily's hands tightened over her belly. "I'm his girlfriend," she said quietly. "I'm pregnant." The word echoed. "Pregnant." Maya spun toward her. "Excuse me?" "I'm pregnant," Lily repeated, firmer now, as if saying it louder might protect it. "Adam and we talked about this." Maya's face drained of color. Then hardened. "That's impossible," she said. "Because I'm pregnant." Nina made a sound, small, broken, and sank onto the arm of a chair. "I'm pregnant too," she said, barely audible. The world tipped. Sarah didn't move. She didn't shout. She simply watched as the truth assembled itself in front of her, piece by unbearable piece. 3 women. 3 confessions. 3 futures tied to my silence. I felt suddenly very small. "You're lying," Maya said to me, her voice shaking with fury. "Tell me she's lying." I looked at the floor. At the rug Emma liked to play on. At the space where honesty should have been. That was answer enough. Sarah laughed then, a single, sharp sound that cut through the room. "Oh," she said softly. "So this is what you've been doing." Lily's eyes filled with tears. "Adam told me he was still healing. That he wanted something slow. Something real." Maya turned on me, rage flashing. "You told me you were ready for a future." Nina stood up, shaking. "You said I was the only one who really understood you." Their words collided, piling up like wreckage. I tried to reach for Lily. Maya slapped my hand away. Nina stepped back as if my touch burned. "Don't," Sarah said, finally raising her voice. "Don't you dare comfort anyone." She stepped closer to me, close enough that I could smell rain on her coat, close enough to see the disappointment etched into her face like a scar. "You didn't just lie," she said. "You constructed this." I swallowed. I never meant for it to happen like this. The sentence sounded pathetic even to me. Lily stared at me, horrified. "Like what?" "Like all of us finding out at once." Maya laughed again, bitter. "You scheduled us, didn't you?" Nina's tears spilled freely now. "Was any of it real?" I opened my mouth. No words came. Sarah looked at the women then, not with jealousy, not with competition, but with a dawning, devastating clarity. "He's done this before," she said quietly. "He knows how to split himself. He knows how to disappear without leaving." I flinched. The room erupted, voices raised, accusations flying, heartbreak taking shape in sound. I stood at the center of it, the calm eye of a storm I had built with care and cowardice. And through it all, one thought pounded in my head, louder than the shouting. Emma. She's asleep, I said suddenly. Please, my daughter. Don't, Sarah snapped. Don't use her as a shield. That was when I knew. The door hadn't just opened to my ex-wife. It had opened to the end of everything I thought I could control. Outside, the rain fell harder, drumming against the windows like a warning I could no longer ignore. And in the living room, surrounded by the wreckage of my secrets, I felt the first true weight of what I had done, pressing down, relentless, irreversible. The night wasn't finished with me yet. The living room turned into a courtroom without a judge. No one sat anymore. Standing felt safer, as if gravity itself might betray us if we stayed still. Words ricocheted off the walls, but beneath them ran a deeper sound, the slow, terrible cracking of trust. Lily spoke first. I met him after a double shift, she said, her voice thin but steady. She didn't look at me, she looked at Sarah, as if instinct knew where honesty belonged now. He waited outside the hospital with coffee because he said I deserved to be seen. He said he was learning how to love again. Her hand slid over her belly, a small, unconscious circle. I believed him. Maya laughed under her breath, a sharp, fractured sound. He flew with me to conferences. He talked about schools and neighborhoods. He said my ambition didn't scare him. She turned to me then, eyes blazing. You looked me in the face and said you wanted a child who would grow up watching his parents build something together. Nina didn't speak at first. She stared at the floor, at the faint scratch Emma had made with a crayon months ago. When she finally lifted her head, her eyes were glassy. He listened, she said. That's what made it real. He listened to my fears. He stayed when I cried. I thought that meant something. Each story landed like a blow I couldn't block. They weren't exaggerations. They were memories. Carefully cultivated. Curated. Mine. Sarah stood apart from it all, arms folded, face unreadable. The rain outside had slowed, streaking the windows like tears someone had already wiped away. She watched the women, then me, then the room itself as if she were memorizing the moment for later, when disbelief would try to soften it. Say it, Maya demanded suddenly. Say you didn't plan this. I searched for words that could still carry weight. Found none. I didn't plan the pregnancies, I said finally. Lily flinched. Nina closed her eyes. Maya's voice dropped. That's not an answer. I planned the lies, I admitted. The truth tasted metallic, like blood. I planned the schedules. I planned what parts of myself you saw. Sarah exhaled slowly. It sounded like restraint. So you knew, she said. You knew what you were doing. I nodded. Silence followed, not empty, but heavy, like the pause after a sentence you can't take back. I was lonely, I said, hating myself for how small it sounded. After the divorce, everything felt hollow. I didn't know how to be alone without disappearing. Lily shook her head. So you made us disappear instead? Nina whispered, you made us share a life without consent. Maya stepped closer, finger pointed at my chest. You stole our futures to patch your emptiness. Each word carved something out of me. I felt exposed, not as a villain, but as something worse, a man who had known better and chosen himself anyway. Sarah finally moved. She crossed the room and picked up an envelope from the coffee table. One of Lily's ultrasound photos had slipped out, its black and white blur stark against the wood. Sarah held it carefully, like it might burn. These are children, she said quietly. Not consequences. Not mistakes. Children. Her eyes met mine. They were colder than I remembered. You don't get to explain your way out of that. The argument reignited, louder now. Voices overlapped. Accusations tangled. Someone knocked over a glass, it shattered, water spreading across the floor like a small flood. No one rushed to clean it. The mess felt appropriate. Through it all, my phone buzzed again. I didn't look. I couldn't. Tell us the truth, Lily said suddenly. All of it. I hesitated. The truth had layers, and none of them would save me. I liked being needed, I said. With each of you, I was someone important. Someone different. I didn't feel like a failure. Maya scoffed. So we were mirrors. Yes, I said. And I kept breaking them. Nina took a step back, as if distance could protect her. I defended you, she said softly. I told people you were good. That hurt more than the shouting. Sarah watched the women fracture in real time, their anger dissolving into something quieter and more dangerous, grief. She stepped between them and me, not to protect me, but to stop the spiral. Enough, she said. The room obeyed. She turned to the women. None of this is your fault. You didn't compete. You were recruited. They looked at her, startled. He's good at making you feel chosen, she continued. He always was. Her gaze flicked to me. But choice without truth isn't choice at all. I wanted to argue. To defend some sliver of myself. But the truth was relentless. It kept moving forward, whether I followed or not. A small sound cut through the tension, a soft creak from the hallway. Emma's door. My heart lurched. She might wake up, I said. Please. Sarah's eyes softened for the first time, but her voice stayed firm. Then this ends now. She addressed the room like a decision already made. You need space. All of you. Maya nodded first. Lily followed. Nina wiped her face and turned away from me without a word. As they gathered their things, the air shifted. The fight drained out of the room, replaced by something colder, resolve. Lily paused at the door. I'll call my sister, she said. Not to me. Maya pulled out her phone. My lawyer will want to hear this. Nina hesitated, then whispered, don't follow me. I didn't. When the door finally closed behind them, the apartment felt cavernous. The quiet that followed wasn't peace, it was aftermath. Sarah remained. She looked around once more, then at me. You didn't just ruin your life, she said. You changed ours. I tried to speak. She raised a hand. Emma will ask one day, she continued. About integrity. About love. About why people break promises. Her voice broke then, just slightly. And I'll have to decide how much of you to tell her about. She turned toward the door. Sarah, I said. She paused, hand on the knob. For what it's worth, I whispered, I'm sorry. She didn't look back. Sorry doesn't raise children, she said. It doesn't undo damage. It just sits there. The door closed. I stood alone amid broken glass and unfinished sentences. I picked up the ultrasound photo Sarah had set back on the table. The image blurred as my vision swam. Outside, the rain had stopped completely. The silence felt permanent. And somewhere down the hall, my daughter slept unaware that the man she trusted most had just lost the right to be believed. I didn't know yet what morning would bring. Only that it was coming. Morning arrived without mercy. Grey light slipped through the blinds, settling over the living room like dust on a crime scene. Nothing had moved overnight, the overturned glass, the damp patch on the rug, the silence that clung to every surface. I had slept on the sofa without dreaming, my body folding into exhaustion while my mind stayed awake, replaying every word I wished I could take back. Emma's footsteps came first. Soft. Familiar. She padded into the room in her socks, rubbing one eye, clutching her blanket like an anchor. Daddy, she asked. The sound of her voice split me open. I smiled because that is what fathers do. I made breakfast because routine is a lie children deserve. I walked her to school under a sky that refused to choose between rain and sun, the clouds hanging low, undecided like judgment waiting to fall. At the school gate, Sarah was there. She stood apart from the other parents, coat buttoned, posture straight, as if she had rehearsed this moment. Emma ran to her, laughing, unaware of the war still burning beneath the calm. I stayed back. Distance felt appropriate now. Sarah kissed Emma's hair, then looked at me over our daughter's head. Not with anger. With resolve. We need to talk, she said. Later. That was all. The hours after stretched painfully. My phone stayed silent for once, its stillness louder than any buzz. I cleaned the apartment slowly, deliberately, picking up shards of glass with care, blotting the rug where water had spilled, as if tidying could stand in for repentance. I found a letter Lily had left behind, folded and forgotten. I didn't open it. I didn't deserve to. By afternoon, Sarah returned. She didn't sit. She never did when she meant business. I've spoken to them, she said. All three. The words landed heavily. They're not enemies, she continued. Not to each other. Not to me. That ends now. I nodded, unable to look at her. You will do the right thing, she said, voice steady. Not because you want forgiveness. But because children are coming into this world who didn't ask for you. I swallowed. Tell me what to do. She met my eyes then, and for a moment I saw the woman I once loved, the one who believed in honesty like it was oxygen. You don't get instructions anymore, she said. You get responsibility. She spoke of solicitors. Of arrangements. Of fairness that would cost me comfort and convenience. She spoke of showing up even when I wasn't wanted. Especially then. This isn't about redemption, she said finally. It's about accountability. When she left, the light had shifted again, evening settling in. I stood by the window, watching clouds thicken, knowing the storm wasn't over, only delayed. On the table lay 3 unopened messages. I didn't know which one I would read first. I only knew I would read them all. The first message I opened was Lily's. Not because it was oldest. Not because it was kindest. But because it felt inevitable, like beginning at the place where the damage had first taken shape. Her words were careful, spaced as if she had stopped often to breathe. She wrote about the hospital smell she couldn't escape anymore, about how every corridor now felt like a question. She wrote about fear, quiet, practical fear of nights alone, of appointments she would attend without me, of a future she had imagined with someone who no longer existed. She didn't ask for apologies. She asked for clarity. For consistency. For truth, finally delivered without embellishment. I sat at the kitchen table while dusk crept in, the sky bruising purple outside the window, and realized that for the first time in months I had nowhere else to be. No schedule to juggle. No lie waiting its turn. I replied simply. I told her I would show up when she needed me to. That I would do what was required, not what was convenient. I didn't promise love. I promised presence. It felt like the least dishonest thing I could offer. Maya's message came next. It was shorter. Sharper. She had already spoken to a solicitor. She outlined expectations in bullet points, financial support, legal recognition, boundaries. It read like a business proposal, stripped of sentiment. Yet beneath the precision I could hear the anger she refused to show. At the end, she wrote one sentence that stayed with me. I trusted you because you looked like stability. I closed my eyes after reading that. Stability had been my disguise. My alibi. I typed my response slowly, knowing every word would be weighed. I accepted her terms. All of them. I didn't argue. I didn't negotiate. Nina's message waited the longest. When I finally opened it, there were no paragraphs, just a voice note. Her voice trembled as she spoke. She didn't talk about the future. She talked about the past. About how she had defended me to her friends, how she had believed softness meant safety. She cried openly, without apology. I don't know who you are, she said at the end. But I know who I thought you were. And I miss him. I sat in silence after it ended, the room pressing in around me. Outside, rain began again, light at first, then steady. It felt appropriate. Rain cleans, they say. But it also exposes cracks. I didn't reply straight away. Some things deserve space. The days that followed were procedural. Meetings. Forms. Schedules drawn up in ink that felt heavier than blood. I signed documents that committed years of my future to consequences I could no longer outrun. There was no drama in it. No raised voices. Just the quiet hum of offices and the weight of inevitability. Sarah handled most of it. We spoke often now, but not intimately. Our conversations were measured, deliberate. She was fair without being kind. She didn't shield me from reality, but she didn't weaponize Emma against me either. That, I knew, was mercy of a higher order. One evening, she handed me a notebook. Write everything down, she said. For yourself. For when Emma asks questions you can't answer off the cuff. I opened it later that night. The pages were blank, their whiteness accusing. I stared at them for hours before writing a single line. I confused being wanted with being worthy. The sentence sat there, small and insufficient. Emma noticed the change before anyone else did. Children always do. I stopped checking my phone during dinner. I stopped smiling through absences. I listened more than I spoke. When she asked why I looked tired, I told her the truth, carefully, age-appropriately. Daddy made mistakes, I said one night as we read together. Big ones. She looked at me, solemn. Are you fixing them? I swallowed. I'm trying. She nodded, accepting that effort mattered even when outcomes were uncertain. There were moments of unexpected grace. Lily invited me to an appointment not to sit beside her, but to wait nearby. It was a boundary, clearly drawn. I respected it. When she emerged, eyes shining, she handed me a printout without a word. I held it like a fragile artifact, aware that trust, once broken, is not repaired by proximity but by time. Maya sent updates via email. Efficient. Unemotional. Yet once, buried between attachments, she added a line, "For what it's worth, I believe people can change if they stop performing." I read that sentence repeatedly. Nina did not contact me for weeks. When she finally did, it was brief. She told me she had moved. That she needed distance to breathe. She did not ask me to follow. I didn't. The hardest moments came at night. The apartment was too quiet now, its silence unbroken by buzzing phones or overlapping voices. I began to notice details I had ignored, the way the floorboard creaked near the window, the faint echo of laughter that lingered like a memory I couldn't touch. One evening, I found a painting Emma had made months earlier, tucked behind the sofa. It showed our family as she had known it then, me, her, and a woman with long hair she had labeled simply Mum. The colors were bright, careless, hopeful. I sat on the floor and cried until the room blurred. Not for what I had lost. For what I had risked without consent. Sarah came by later that week to drop off Emma's school bag. She paused at the doorway, eyes scanning the room, noting the changes. "You're quieter," she said. "I'm listening," I replied. She nodded once. "That's new." Before she left, she turned back. "This doesn't end neatly," she said. "It won't resolve into forgiveness or punishment. It will just continue." "I know," I said. "And you don't get to be the hero," she added. I managed a small, honest smile. "I don't want to be." Winter crept in slowly. Days shortened. Mornings grew sharp. I walked Emma to school beneath bare trees, their branches like outstretched hands, empty but alive. Some parents still smiled at me the same way. Others didn't. I learned to accept both. There were setbacks. Arguments. Moments where resentment flared, mine and theirs. Growth, I learned, is not linear. It loops. It stumbles. It demands repetition. But there were also signs, small, tentative, that something steadier was forming beneath the wreckage. Lily began to trust my consistency. Maya acknowledged my follow-through. Nina sent a message on a Sunday afternoon, "I'm still angry. But I'm not broken." I stared at those words for a long time. On the anniversary of the night everything fell apart, I stood alone by the window as rain traced familiar paths down the glass. I held the notebook Sarah had given me, now filled with fragments, confessions, reflections, questions I might never answer fully. I added one final line. "Accountability isn't the end of love. It's where love stops lying." Outside, the rain eased. I didn't know what the future would look like, not really. It would be complicated. Shared. Uneven. It would ask more of me than charm ever had. But for the first time, I wasn't afraid of being seen as I was. And that, I realized, was where real change begins.